5 Eastern Time. Thank you, everyone, for getting onto our general member call. We are the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, and we are here to talk to you tonight about the election of Donald Trump and how to make this country ungovernable. That is the message that we want everyone to take home as they figure out ways to organize as many people as can be organized against the oncoming attacks of Donald Trump. My name is Chris Carpio. I am on the Central Committee of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, and we have our speakers waiting for you tonight, Fernando Figueroa and Sydney Loving, both on the Central Committee of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, and Marisol Marquez, a national representative from the network Legalization for All, speaking to us from California. All here to talk to you about what it means that Donald Trump is now president, and what it means for the task moving forward. And then we have our national organizer, Andy Koch. Thank you, as always, for handling tech and moderation. And I hope everyone is excited for our program. We'll dive right into it. So Donald Trump was elected president for his second term last week. The last time that he was president, his administration was rife with attack after attack on the masses of the US. Women, LGBTQ folks and youth, Black folks living under police terror, immigrants, students, and organized labor, and more. We don't expect them to be any softer this time around either. We worked hard to smash and do our best to smash everything he tried last time, and we're going to do it again this time. He has spent his time out of office after he was not voted in 2020, choosing to endorse governors who were passing anti-trans bills, cheering on the end of reproductive rights, being a proponent of anti-union laws, the decertification of unions, right to work legislation, helping politicians try to end even the weakest kind of oversight on killer cops, and now making noises about increasing the amount of deportations even more. He wants to raise the level of attacks on progressives, the pro-Palestine movement, and more, and communists in particular, right? He loves talking about that. The last time we got on this call a couple of weeks ago, we said both candidates are rotten products of a rotten system, that Palestine was the key question in the world today, and that we would not vote for a genocide and lose the trust of the fighting masses. The leadership of the Democratic Party did what they've been doing for some years now and decided that they would not offer anything meaningful to the working class, that they would not speak to the working class's needs or even the needs of folks who've been their historical base as well, like Black voters, immigrants. They lost the election as a result, and that's our view. So this call is for us to decide the way forward, right? Our goal is to make the US ungovernable because we will not accept Trump as the supposed leader of this country. So to that end, we're going to hear from our excellent panelists about what this means for the way forward. After each one presents, we're excited to hear your questions. Please make sure you direct them at either a particular panelist or everyone, right? And yeah, that's what will happen today. So let's go ahead and let's get started. First up, we'll hear from Fernando Figueroa from the Central Committee of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Take it away, Fern.
Hey folks, good evening. My name's Fern. I'm a member of the Central Committee of Freedom Road Socialist Organization. I live in Jacksonville, Florida, where I've worked as a rank and file Teamster in a large warehouse for the past 12 years. Prior to getting active in the trade union movement, I was a student organizer with Students for a Democratic Society. So like our November 6th statement that you can read on Fightback says, so it happened. Many of my personal friends and fellow organizers here in Jacksonville first got active during the original campaign we ran to dump Trump in 2016. And it feels like we're kind of back in the saddle these days. So I'd like to begin by making one point very clear, that it is solely the responsibility of the leadership of the Democratic Party that's to blame for the return of Trump to the Oval Office. Trump ran the same old campaign of bashing progressive ideas, using national chauvinism and male chauvinism to rally backwards forces to himself, and all the other tricks that we saw him use the last time. The Democrats may try and blame other groups, but we know better. Instead of learning from past mistakes, the Dems remain committed to genocide in Palestine, and they failed to inspire confidence in their ability to fix problems here at home. And while it's important to reflect on and study the past, tonight's not about looking behind us. Rather, tonight we're focused on the struggle ahead and the path in front of us, and we're focused on building the real resistance to Trump and his agenda. Our main job in the coming period is going to be building that fight, building that resistance to Donald Trump. Political polarization is continuing to deepen in the United States, and it's important for us as communists to build the anti-Trump movement. That will allow us to build the broadest social movement possible, and Freedom Road Socialist Organization will grow by leaps and bounds. In fact, I heard earlier this week that since the election, we're beginning to approach over 100 new requests to join as general members. And I think that this Zoom call that we're on right now might be the largest meeting that we've ever held. So it just goes to show you that we're growing and people want to fight. And we can meet like-minded people and groups when we engage in struggle. These fights are already happening and are sure to ramp up as the people face attacks from the Trump administration. Lots of people are angry and worried about the future, and it's our job as communists to provide not only an analysis of the system that led us here, but to learn and teach methods for organizing for real change that needs to happen in this country through struggle and revolution. That organizing happens on the shop floor, in your neighborhood, on campus, and most importantly, in the streets when we rally and protest against attacks on the people and fight for a better world. If you're not connected to a local group of activists, it's time to join a group or start one yourself. There's never been a better time. We know we've got a tough fight ahead of us, but as Reds, we live for the fight. We need to defend the rights of women and LGBTQ folks. Trade unions like my own are going to face challenges to the right to exist and to organize new workers. Police crimes against oppressed nationality and poor folks, especially crimes against Black people, are going to keep taking place while Trump is in office, and he's not going to lift a finger to stop it. The people are going to have to fight back. Student diversity on campus and the very right to protest are already coming under attack, and it's going to intensify. And Trump has also made it clear that he doesn't care about protecting what's left of the environment either. In addition to all these other attacks, immigrants are going to face some of the strongest attacks, both on the border and in our communities and neighborhoods. Attacks that seek to rip families apart and oppress Chicano and Latino folks in brutal and inhumane ways. We have to resist these attacks, and the main weapon of our resistance is organizing. It's being active in our communities and hosting events. If you've never organized a speaker panel, it's time to learn how. If you've never led a protest outside the stairs to City Hall, we're here to help folks take those first steps. Now, if you're already active, then it's time to challenge ourselves to push the limits of our organizing, to get new people involved, to reach out to forces that weren't active before and get them to join us in the streets. If you're used to leading chants outside the mayor's office, it's time to move the crowd into the building. If you're used to demonstrating and rallying on the sidewalk, then you need to take the streets. History has shown us that organizing people and leading campaigns designed to strike back at the enemy is the only way out of a mess, like the one monopoly capitalism has created. And it's a mess that Donald Trump desperately wants to make even worse. Monopoly capitalism, or what Lenin called imperialism, is responsible for this mess, and only scientific socialism can help us fight our way out of it. Our main job in the coming period is to build a broad, united front against imperialism, and our focus needs to be on stopping Trump and his reactionary plans. He's no friend to the Palestinian people, and so we will continue to support and uplift their struggle for liberation while continuing to call for an end to U.S. aid to Israel. Freedom Road has a rich tradition of drawing inspiration from national liberation struggles around the world, and there's a lot going on in the world today to help inspire our organizing here at home. Organize, push the limits, and make this country ungovernable. That's the path ahead.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Fern. Yeah, if you're rallying outside, it's time to go in the building. If you're on the sidewalk, it's time to go into the streets. I love that. Let's keep escalating and uh, give this administration the toughest time they could possibly see. All right, we'll go next now to Marisol Marquez from Legalization for All, speaking to us from LA. Take it away, Sol.
Gracias, Chrisley. Buenas tardes, everyone. My name is Marisol Marquez. I go by Sol. That's what my family and my comrades and my friends call me. And it's awesome to be talking to so many people from all over the country, right? I see people in the chat saying that they're newbies, that they've never been on here before. So it's great to have, people who have been on here a lot, or people who have never been on here and this is their first time. I am speaking on behalf of the Legalization for All Network, or we like to call it L4A to keep it real short. But I know a lot of you are joining us because you're not happy. You're not happy with the outcome that Trump is in office. But I don't think any of us would really be literally cheering if Kamala Harris were in office, right? So I think we're all in the right room at the right time. So legalization for all, right? I was born to undocumented parents from Mexico. My parents were from the states of Durango and Hidalgo, and they met picking oranges in the state of Florida, right? But this is what kind of led me to be passionate about immigrant rights is that my parents were undocumented for a long time. And so in 2012, I helped to join and help start Legalization for All Network with a couple of cool people who were already in the mix, an organization out of the Midwest named MIRAC, or Minnesota Immigrants' Rights Action Committee. They were starting already in 2006 when the mega marches or the big Sensenbrenner provoked massive movements around the country, led people to come out in the millions, and people were empowered to say, we're not going to make it okay for felonies to be put on people who are undocumented, right? And so in 2006, Mirac helped lead those protests. And I know that Carlos Montes, who's on, I saw he was on the chat. I know he helped lead some of those big mega marches in Los Angeles. I lived in Yakima, or in the Yakima Valley of Washington State. So in 2006, I actually joined with my parents out on the streets, but I was still, I had just graduated from high school. So yeah, I wasn't leading much at that time. I know it's no excuse because there's a lot of you who have been doing a lot of or organizing when you're still in high school or, even younger. So, but that is to say that Legalization for All has been fighting back since 2012. And as you can imagine, there have been various presidents in office, right? We had Obama, the deporter in chief, in 2012. We had President Biden, who is still in office right now. Biden hasn't really made it a very welcoming place for people crossing through the Mexico-US border, especially in Eagle Pass, where Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, decided to install buoys, lethal buoys that are razor sharp wired. And Biden and Kamala Harris both took some trips to see the situation. The federal government did say that the buoys needed to go because the river is not owned by a single person. I think all of us can understand that a river is nature and it is not governed by either Mexico or the US. But yet the buoys are there, and Biden could have made, a much stronger position, could have taken a stronger position, could have made a stronger decision to have them removed. And instead, nothing much happened, and the buoys are still there. I have some friends, and we have some folks, members of Legalization for All, who traveled there. Carlos traveled there. We also had Gabriel and Jordan and other people from Minnesota and Texas traveled there to witness these buoys in person. And they're horrendous. They got to see that there's so many human rights violations happening on the daily, stuff that they should never be allowed to do. And I'm talking about the Border Patrol, right? They took over Shelby Park in Eagle Pass, Texas, which is a park, and it's supposed to be available to everyone and able to be enjoyed by the general public. And instead, it's become a militarized zone where the Texas U.S. Marshals, not the federal U.S. Marshals, but the Texan ones, have overtaken the Shelby Park, and they've made it their area where they now can turn people away and not even process them for a refugee application, which is what they're supposed to do. And so we've seen it all, right? And the Legalization for All Network has been there since day one, exposing these facts, exposing the U.S. for what it is, even under President Biden. And so under Trump, we don't foresee that things are going to be any better. Of course, we understand that the situation is going to be a lot worse in some ways, especially when you have him appointing somebody like Thomas Homan, the border czar, donning the title of czar, which is like a king, which is ridiculous. And so we have him in office who's saying, oh, your demand is stop separating families, then we'll deport a whole family together. That's what Thomas Homan is saying, including US citizens. So now we're talking about another violation of people's federal rights, including many other rights, right? And so we're completely against that, and we are ready to fight back. As Fern just said, we need to make friends with a lot of people who we normally would not be friends with. We got to make the US ungovernable. And so this is our mission in the Legalization for All network, is to make sure that we keep pushing our pillars, which matter so much to us. In the network, people like us are into legalization for all, of course. We want people to become legalized. And this is an option for people to not be deported, but also if they want to become US citizens or not, they can do so. They can make that decision. We don't want, of course, a racist border wall. We don't want border militarization and the deaths that are caused by this militarization and the border wall. We actually had a border delegation, the Legalization for All in 2023, and we were able to see that the border wall is being replaced. So Trump enacted, I'm sure a lot of you know, a new border wall that makes it so that instead of being 15 feet, it is now 30 feet. And what's this random number, you might ask? Well, they did their studies and they found out that 30 feet is unbreakable. You can't break that fall. If you were to fall, you would have a severe injury or even death. And so, they tested this horrendous thing, and now this border wall is very, very lethal. So we're completely against that. We want it to be removed. Stop the exploitation of undocumented workers. A lot of their wages are stolen. A lot of them are not even paid. And so we want that to stop immediately. We want to stop to the deportations and separation of families. And so, like I said, we're prepared to do this. We do have some folks that are very sad, and they should rightfully so be sad that Trump is in office. However, we want them to not be despaired. We don't want them to be upset and think that there's nothing that we can do, because yes, we can. All change that has happened throughout history has not been because people asked for it nicely. We got our change, we got our liberation, we got our freedom because we decided to stand united and to fight back no matter who was in office. And so I urge everybody to, if you care about immigrant rights, if you care about the issues that we're going to be talking about today, please join an already existing organization or a network like Legalization for All, or make one yourself, like Fern was saying. If you've never organized a protest, if you've never led a chant, don't worry, you're connecting in the chat group with friends who have done so. And if not, just reach out to any of us, right? We would be happy to show you how to create a chant list, how to make a flyer. There's a lot of really free services out there that you can even use on your phone or whatever technology you have. But this is the time to stand up and to really leave your fear in the dark, And no matter what you do, we're going to give you some pointers on how you can make it work, because our mission is to make the US ungovernable, and that's what we're going to do. Turning it back to you, Chrisley.
Awesome. Thank you, Sol. And thanks to everyone in Legalization for All for continuing an inspiring fight. I appreciated you talking about the mega marches with the Sensenbrenner bill, because that's exactly the sort of thing Trump talks about bringing back, right? Like mass deportations, and millions of people marched, and it brought May Day back into the public consciousness. Like that's the sort of thing we should be aiming to do, is, it became a May Day protest because the slogans, I believe, were "a day without immigrant workers." So that's what we mean when we say make the US ungovernable. Like, not a wheel should turn, not a service should be done, nothing should be built until we get our demands and get what we want. And obstruct any part of Trump's agenda. Thank you so much, Sol. And next we will go to Sydney Loving from the Central Committee of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization to talk to us about the path forward. Go ahead, Sid.
Hello, hello. Yes, I'm Sydney. Happy to be here. Happy to see everybody in here, ready to fight back. I'm going to be talking also about, what the political landscape is kind of looking like and what the fight ahead is. And I'm going to be talking from the perspective of my area of work, which is in the Black liberation movement. That's how I started organizing, was, you know, the fight against police crime. So that's the perspective I'm speaking from. And we know why, you know, the struggle for Black liberation is a key part of the struggle for socialism in the United States. If you don't know, now you know. You can read Frank Chapman's book on, you know, Marxism, Leninism, and perspectives on Black liberation. But let's talk about why we're here. So we're going to talk about, you know, how we got here, the road ahead, and what we're going to do about it. And, you know, the Comrade Fern laid out some of the things that played into this election. You know, we know that the genocidal war in Gaza played a key role. We know that the Democrats ran a lousy campaign, abandoned the working class. Like he said, rotten choice. Like Chrisley said, rotten choices from a rotten system. And, you know, let's talk about it. The white chauvinism and white nationalism, you know, Trump used that. You know, that played a big role in him, you know, consolidating political power. You know, that a lot of that messaging around the border wall, around protests, and that messaging, you know, really gave a platform and to white nationalism, right? So we have to understand that. But you know, understanding how we got here is one thing. We also need to know what's coming and what we're going to do about it. You know, and understanding the terrain that we're fighting on so we can anticipate things, taking a scientific look at what's happening, so we can make predictions. Communists are good at that. But let's get into it. There's legislative attacks on the state level, on the federal level. You know, in the fight against police crimes, the George Floyd bill is effectively dead. There's state bans on DEI programs. There's you know, there's legal challenges to civil rights protections. That's been happening, and it's going to be emboldened under Trump. Challenges to affirmative actions. Um, you know, another consideration for us is these laws that are targeting protests and targeting, you know, the right to mobilize. In Florida, they've got anti-riot laws, and this stuff started like around around 2021. But you know, with the consolidation of power, with these Republicans in office, it's going to keep coming down the pipeline. And there's laws like that in Oklahoma, in Iowa, and Texas, where I'm from. Speaking about police violence, you know, if you look at the statistics, police killings in the United States have been on the rise year by year. This is something that is not caused by a Trump presidency, but it's something that a Trump presidency is going to embolden. And like Fern said, there won't be a finger lifted against it, right? We also have to understand that, you know, police terror, but also state sanctioned, you know, vigilante violence, and those elements are playing a role as well. You know, the state repression, the violence that we're going to see, the attacks on our movements, you know, that's all a part of what's coming down the line, but we are well positioned to fight in our different areas of work. When we talk about police accountability, what we're trying to do is to bust open the organizing space. We understand that police are a tool of boxing that in. Police violence is a tool of national oppression. They're trying to destroy our movements and attack our movements. So we do have to deal with the police, but we have so much experience and so many strengths, and we're well positioned to fight. We help to lead the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. We're in cities all over the country. If you are representing a branch of the alliance or affiliated with us, drop it in the chat. We have a wealth of experience fighting against police crimes, fighting for justice for victims of police crimes, and fighting repression, organizing against racist laws, leading mass mobilizations, building solidarity. We've been doing that, and it's going to take now, like was mentioned before, taking it to the next level, and not going into the shadows or allowing, fear to paralyze us or anything like that. There's so many opportunities for us, um, in light of all of the attacks that are coming our way. There's opportunities there as well. But I do want to say, as communists, as revolutionaries in these movements, we have to lead. We have to consciously intervene in the Black liberation movement and put things, on a revolutionary path. And the other thing is that the Democrats have shown us very clearly that they won't lead these fights to defend democratic rights, defend civil rights, and all the areas, the attacks that we're going to be facing. The Democrats are not going to lead those fights. Communists have to do that. And so we have to bring the fight, not just because we're better at it, which we are, but because they won't. And so when we say we want to unite broad forces, we mean that. So we will unite with some of those forces wherever we can. We want to unite the many against the few. But we're fighting for working class leadership. Communists will lead these fights, and that's what we're ready to do. So, this is going to mean, like we said, stepping it up in terms of our mass mobilizations. When we talked about some of the federal and statewide fights, that's going to mean, creating broad coalitions and pulling together local fights to be able to stage these struggles on the state arena and the national arena. And we're going to build solidarity. We know that we fight repression not from hiding, but we fight repression through solidarity. We have to build mass support. That's the most important thing we do, and that's how we defend ourselves. We know how to defend ourselves in our movements, and we're going to continue to do that and build the broadest and strongest movement that we can against Trump's agenda. So, we in the Black liberation movement, we're well prepared. We're getting even more well prepared to lead the fight against all of the challenges that we have in this new terrain, but we have experience mobilizing for justice, combating repression, and we want to push the limits of our organizing. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to channel any talk of fear or hiding or anything. We're not doing that. We're channeling anger into action, and building up our movement. So we're going to do that together. Thank you everybody for putting the cities in the chat. Like the sister said, we're all over. So now is the time to organize. And we have everything to gain and nothing to lose.
Sydney loving everyone, 100%. Now is not the time to be afraid. Now is the time to fight every bad thing that can happen, every racist law, every attack on labor, every attack on, like they're talking about getting rid of the Department of Education. That's getting rid of grants. That's getting rid of public schools. The attacks, if Trump tries to deliver on everything he's promising, they'll be big. Every single one of those is a rallying call for communists to lead the fight. Like Sid said, it's not the time to be afraid. It's the time to use what we know. And like she said, we know how to beat charges. We know how to fight repression. you know, and we have a great track record for it. FBI raids, felony charges. You know, we're not afraid to take on this fight. And we will be the group that can build a communist party out of this fight. So for everyone networking in the chat, please go on to our website, frso.org/join, and sign up, become a general member, become a cadre if you want to organize and go out among the masses and talk about these things. And then before we go to question and answer too, I also want to plug that our organization has published books, right? So the program is a powerful tool. If you haven't read it already, you need to read that. It summarizes who we are and what our line is. Even better, you can get copies of it and propagate it amongst your coworkers. You can propagate it within your union, within the mass organization if you're in one, you know, friends who you're trying to get to join with you. Use our program. It is a tool with which you can organize. And then we have our books, Revolutionary Science of Marxism-Leninism by Jay Sykes, which you can also study communism with, and Marxist-Leninist Perspectives on Black Liberation and Socialism by Frank Chapman, who is an important leader in our organization and the Black Liberation Movement. So we will go to question and answer in a sec. Before we do that, yeah, go ahead, Sid.
I just wanted to say somebody put in the chat, and I totally forgot to even say this, but like I said, the National Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression rolls deep all over the country, rolls deep in the South as well, and the Southern Regional Organizing Conference is coming up. So they dropped the link there for folks to register and see what we're doing.
Absolutely. And to kind of give clarity, we're having a Southern Regional Organizing Conference because our group takes the national question seriously. We view that there are actually 3 oppressed nations in the U.S. That we know of at this time, the Black Belt South, the Southwest Aslan, and Hawaii, right? So, you know, because that's important to us, we have the Southern Regional Organizing Conference, or the National Alliance does, and the FRSO is doing everything we can to build it. So if someone wants to put that registration link in the chat again for convenience. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Do people have questions from the floor? Please raise your hand because it's easier to call on people that way than in the chat, which moves very quickly. Yeah, let's go to Jackie R. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sure. So you need to stay muted because your mic doesn't work, but your question is quick. Okay. If you want to throw that in the chat so we can read it. I don't know if I see it yet. Okay, maybe while you're working on typing that up for us, Jackie, if others have other questions from the floor as well, we'll go to them in the meantime. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. We've got the question from Jackie, and then we'll go to you, Marigold. Okay. Last time Donald Trump took office, the Dems and liberals were all over the organizing and dissent. In many ways, they controlled it. How can we prevent liberal co-optation of what must be a socialist movement? So, do any of our panelists have questions of how we can take leadership? Yeah, Fern.
Oh, I was just thinking about the question. You know, I think we can really distinguish ourselves. In Freedom Road, we talk about having like leadership and initiative of the United Front. You know, and we want to distinguish ourselves because the tactics and strategies that we're going to use are going to be very different from what a lot of the Democrat party hacks are going to try to do in the coming period. We're not going to focus our primary work around elections or anything like that. We're going to be out in the streets fighting for specific issues around social justice, looking for, you know, bad bills that Republicans and others are trying to force through the legislative process. We're going to be looking at deportations that are going on in the communities and protesting that and occupying offices around that. We're going to be looking at attacks on trade unions and lots of other groups and leading campaigns that get people organized in the workplace, confronting the boss, protesting and marching in the streets, and rallying on campus. And again, pushing the limit of what we're normally used to doing, of what we're comfortable doing, to get real change going on, and not simply relying on, a primarily electoral based approach. So we're definitely going to distinguish ourselves. And I'm sure a lot of Democrats are going to be won over to our ideas, and there are going to be some who aren't. But as long as we're trying to build a broad, united front to get real change, because we understand what the real problems are, I think our movement's going to look very different and be very strong.
Awesome. Thank you, Fern. Independence and initiative. Yes, Soul.
There we go. Sorry about that, y'all. I love what Fern answered, right? I think that's spot on as well. I just wanted to add that, we're trying to make our mission today is to have y'all walk away with thinking, I'm going to help make the US ungovernable, right? And so part of what we've been saying a lot tonight is united front, right? And somebody put it in the chat, unity of action, not of ideas, right? But we do want people to be friendly towards what we're trying to build, right? So well somebody it was Jackie who said that, maybe some of these like liberal folk were in charge of the rhetoric last time around. I do think that it's important though to meet people where they're at. If people are upset that deportations are coming through, then make sure that you organize around stopping deportations, etc. Right? There's a lot of issues that matter to a lot of people depending on where you live. For me in Los Angeles, of course, it's going to be about deportations. It's going to be about people who are undocumented. And we want to be friendly to everyone. We want people to be attracted to the fact that the enemy are the rich, right? The enemy is Trump. The enemy is ICE. The enemy is the police, right? And a lot of different factors that go into oppressing us on the daily. And so if we're just, saying, oh, we don't want to fight with y'all, we don't want to unite with y'all, because you don't, say revolution in your sentences, that's really going to make us lonely, right? We don't need to be lonely in a time where we should stand together to fight back against the number one enemy that we all have, right? So I just thought I wanted to say that. Back to you, sister.
Thank you, Soul. And you're 100% correct. The liberals are not our enemy. Most people in the US, a lot of people in the US identify as liberals. They are not the leadership of the Democratic Party. We know who those people are, right? The finance capitals, right? But that's not the people who came out and voted or chose not to vote. It could be your parents, it could be your coworkers. So let's keep an open mind and unite around action. Times like this, people's minds are changing. And more than that, we want to be the ones to change them, right? To change those ideas. And if we didn't think people's views could change, we wouldn't be communists and we wouldn't be in this meeting. So thank you very much to our panelists. Do others want to answer that question? If we're good, then we can go to the next hands. Okay, we can go to the next hands. We'll go to Marigold.
Hello. I have a slightly related question, I guess, and it's some of what I think Sol just touched on, but I wanted to put it directly though. When I think about talking about building a movement against Trump, I'm thinking back to like last time Trump was in office and the culmination of the 2020 election when Joe Biden was finally announced as the winner like a week later. I remember there seemed to be just like celebration everywhere from what I can see. And then we know 4 years later what happened with Biden's presidency is police murders went up. The Roe v. Wade was cut down under Biden, that more anti-trans bills across the US came up and he refused to fight them. More border wall was built still. And I think that a lot of us, us here with a like proper Marxist-Leninist analysis can recognize how Trump is more the symptom than the problem, right? That we're in an empire in decline and things are going to keep on getting worse like this, and that Trump is just a really flashy symbol of that. And so I'm just wondering, how do we like avoid that getting to that point that we got to 4 years ago, where getting Trump out by any means necessary meant putting Joe Biden in and then losing a lot of the steam? How do we make sure that, like, even though we're trying to draw people in, maybe with we gotta fight against Trump, how do we make sure that we don't lose this spirit and make sure that it's ultimately a fight against monopoly capitalism and not just the one orange man?
All right. Thank you, Marigold. Do any of our speakers want to? Yeah, go ahead, Sid.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just say sometimes there's a a we could talk about the pendulum, right? And also we talk about the ebbs and flows of the mass movements, right? There's times when the mobilization and the energy is at a high level, and then there's times when it's low. Um, you know, we have to position ourselves in the peaks and the valleys to build the fight. But what are we really trying to do? We're not. That's why we talk about we want to unite as many forces as we can. Some who have a different vision of what they're going for than what we're going for, which is revolution. But we want to unite everybody we can under our leadership, because not because we want to swing the pendulum back and forth or get back to the Democrats, but we as revolutionaries in the movement, we want to, you know, find the advance, the people that are activated in the struggle to change things. We want to win them over to revolutionary organization. We want to win campaigns like folks were talking about, and and you know, and we want to raise the level of struggle. So even through those peaks and valleys, those ebbs and flows, each time we want to keep that rising level of organization, and build the fight. Ours is a long-term fight. Um, so you know, we have our eyes on the prize. Yeah.
Yeah, 100% Sid. And I raised my hand because I wanted to also take a stab at the question, but you're right that our central task has been party building, and that's what we've been doing the whole time, rather than knocking on doors to get folks elected. But, you know, another thing that we said the last time we met too on these calls is that the Democrats and the Republicans are not the same. They do have different positions on some things. There are some things that we had taken for granted, you know, with Democrat leadership, like the Department of Education existing, right? That could be under attack before. And I remember, you know, people didn't think Trump could win as president the first time and, you know, do such a thing as build a US-Mexico border wall. And then he did, right? He's trying to use national chauvinism, like people have said. And, you know, they represent, the Democrats and Republicans represent the same class, but they do have different positions on different things. And it means we can build a big fight if we tried. And the people in the chat saying that we all used to be liberals is correct. And I still remember being, you know, someone who loved Jon Stewart and then, you know, joined a student group. So yeah, let's go to Seoul.
There we go. Sorry, y'all. I'm trying to get better at unmuting myself. Exactly, Chrisley. I was a liberal and I did like Jon Stewart. So, oh my gosh, you just like hit it on the nail for me. But yeah, so yeah, embarrassing, y'all. I'll admit it. So I did want to add my 2 cents to this just because it's a good question, right, Marigold? I do want to remind us though that while 2016 was like so long ago, it feels like, right, when Trump first got elected, I do want to say that January 6th, 2017, I saw massive protests around the country during his inauguration. In Los Angeles, we helped lead a huge protest that was in the middle of the rain, and it hardly ever rains in Los Angeles, but it did that day. And it was very memorable because we were freezing, and a lot of us were not equipped for the rain that day. And so, you know, I got to see that and I was like, damn, you know, we're pretty strong. We're pretty united out here. I saw people that I know for a fact were Democrats out there on the streets, who hadn't been protesting, and then they went out that day because they were unhappy, which is the rightful position. But I also wanted to remind us that George Floyd actually was killed in 2020, and that we saw, you know, a police precinct be burned in Minnesota, right? And so I just think that those are the kinds of things that draw us back into how powerful we can be if we stand united. We do understand that sometimes it takes Trump to spur people into taking action, and that's all right. And we should be there. We should be ready and helping lead the fight, instead of being, you know, super upset and wanting to cry the entire time, right? I know that I helped organize with a lot of people in Los Angeles a post-election rally here in Boyle Heights at a metro station. And one of the people asked me, one of the attendees and a friend of mine, her name is, or their name is Luna, and they asked me, how were you doing yesterday? And I said, what do you mean? And it took me a while to realize that it was such a devastating blow to a lot of people that Trump got elected, and they were watching it. And I was just very, very bitterly, like, I very cynically watching, because I knew he was going to win in my mind, right? And so it does take us a lot to be, you know, understanding of people, and it's right for them to be upset. But I do think we gotta take the moment now and fight back as soon as we can.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sol. And then Fern, I saw your hand come up earlier. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly, I think folks covered it. I wanted to highlight too that people learn through struggle. You know, that's a saying in Freedom Road Socialist Organization and in Marxism in general. People learn through struggle. I think that one way to keep folks from like the pendulum swinging back and forth from like Democrat or Republican thinking, get them involved in the struggle. Folks who are involved in the struggle, who are protesting out in the streets against police crimes, who are opposed to like transphobic bills that are coming out, folks who are fighting for the environment, they see the hypocrisy of both parties of the 1% in action. You know, when you're out there fighting for something and your mayor, who might be a Democrat, is calling the police on you, is trying to stop what you're doing, is not playing ball, not being friendly to these progressive ideas you're trying to put forth into the community, that's when people learn to stop thinking that the Democrats are the solution and start looking to organizing others, you know, once they learn through struggle. And I think that's the key to pulling more people away from that mindset. You know, we learn things from books, we learn things from panels like this one we're having tonight, but the main way people learn is experience and struggle.
100% Fern. That's the theory, the Marxist theory of knowledge. All right, so we've got a lot of hands. Let's go next to Alex Kogan.
Seems like a lot of our questions are on similar themes. But so obviously it seems like a lot of people's analyses have shifted since 2016. And we can see how Democrats trying to run the same election, do the same strategy again as they did in 2016 didn't work out. And so I wanted to know, like, how are conditions now different from 2017, and how will FRSO's strategy be different than it was in 2017? Because otherwise we can't just be like, just organize more and harder the way that you already have been for 8 years, or that you did in the first time, because as someone said, that just resulted in Trump again.
All right, thank you, Alex. Do any of our panelists want to speak to that? Yeah, Fern.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite differences about organizing in the coming period versus our experience after 2016 is that our organization has grown by leaps and bounds. I think it's going to continue along that trend, but we're a lot stronger, we're a lot bigger in different places, we're active in more cities now than we were back then, and I think that that's going to contribute to our ability to win all that can be won. And I think that's going to be a real key difference that we feel here compared to our efforts to organize in the past. I'm going to shout out some of my friends in Salt Lake City who are organizing on campuses at the university there, who, recently had a good victory, getting some real divestment from the university's program to support Israel. I'm going to highlight, comrades that are working in the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression and their effort to bring real change and real uh, options for the people forward in the forms of fighting for civilian police accountability councils. I think we're going to see victories here, and I think that's going to draw more and more people into the fight. I think we are going to be able to see victories as hard as Trump is going to come after immigrants. I think the immigrants' rights movement is going to grow, is going to be able to fight back and win real victories. And I think that's going to continue to swell our numbers and to swell our real power and our real ability to affect change for people. I think that, uh, for example, I work for a very large warehouse covered by the Teamsters, and because of our comrades pushing within the Teamsters Union, we were able to get better leadership and win a historic contract that made a real difference for workers on the grounds, a better contract than I've ever seen since I've been working there. And I think that comrades all over the country are going to be involved in fights and get better results, better victories than we would see otherwise if the Democrats were fumbling around trying to figure out what to do. I think the people on this call are going to be what makes the difference in this fight, because we're going to get active, we're going to be in the streets, and we're going to really push the limits and build the broadest movement possible that includes a lot of liberal folks, a lot of folks who won't agree with us on everything, but who are united against fighting Donald Trump and his reactionary agenda.
Yeah, 100%. We are closer now than we were in 2017 to the goal of party building. So, and getting it built. So let's keep going. Other panelists, speakers? Okay. If not, let's just keep rolling with the questions. Let's go to D.
Hey everyone, glad to be here. The question that I have requires a little bit of context. So I've been organizing around Palestinian liberation in my community for the past year now, at this point, and from an emotional standpoint, it's been frustrating, feeling like the movement in the United States and the West and the Imperial Core hasn't necessarily met the urgency of the genocide. Now I have comrades who I organize with who will say things like, um, we have to meet people where they're at and that it's a long-term fight, which I completely understand. But in a situation where every passing day could mean thousands of violent deaths, where it feels like we could be doing more for the sheer fact that we just have access to more resources than those in the global South, it does feel like time is a luxury. Now, I'm new to this organization, but I was a former dues-paying member in the DSA. I was going to join the PSL, but ended up not sticking with either group because the city I'm in, folks who are more politically active, who I've encountered, tended to be more well off. Where I come from, I came from a single mother working class family. My earliest memory was being evicted from my home at the age of 6. So it's been hard to see eye to eye with those who I feel like haven't met the sense of urgency of those who have experienced material difficulties. Now I'm just curious, my question, like what would be a proper response and action or even anything that people who feel similarly to I do, like what would that look like to you guys? Um, and feeling that just how to deal with that frustration.
All right, panelists. What do folks think? How can we channel how we feel about what's going on in Palestine? Yes, Sol.
Hey y'all, thank you. Dee, that's a really good question. And thank you for being so, upfront with your situation. It sounds like you're using that to motivate you, which I find very awesome. I did want to say that, I help organize, even though I'm with the Legalization for All Network, I do belong to an organization, a mass organization in Los Angeles called Centro CSO, or Community Service Organization, been around since the 40s. And shout out to anybody from CSO who is on this call. But I did want to say that during the Grammys, and I'm just going to say this to you as some inspiration for you, you know, in the darkness of times where you might be like thinking, why is everybody just going about their business and not caring about the genocide in Palestine, right? So we live in Los Angeles. Hollywood is really close, and big money movie making stuff happens all the time. That includes the Grammys. And so we were very angry that the Grammys were just going about their business when in the middle of this genocide, they could have stopped it. They could have funded, you know, Palestine instead. They could have done a lot of things. And so we organized with the US Palestinian Community Network to try to shut down the Grammys. And so CSO was at the forefront, and we took to the streets, and we did it with the USPCN and a couple of other really cool friends. And while we didn't straight up shut down the Grammys, we definitely delayed it. And we felt really, really awesome when people like Mark Ruffalo shouted us out and on the red carpet said, you know, justice for Palestine. Those are small victories that I think really show that you can make a difference. And when, you know, people are trying to go about their business, we should interrupt them. You know, we should interrupt them. We should remind them of what's really happening around the world, especially with the genocide of Palestine, and shut shit down if you can. You know, I recently heard that in Chicago, they interrupted, I forget his name. What's the Zionist humorist guy? What's comedy? Sorry, I'm like, what is the word? My English and Spanish. What's his name, y'all? I forget, but they interrupted that, and I was so happy to see that happen. So yeah, if you are sad, just make sure that you can remind yourself that you can shut something down that is Zionist, or, you know, to try to fund the people of Palestine instead.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Soul. And inspiring to hear that that's what comrades were up to on the night of the Grammys. We're always there. Any other things people want to say among our panelists? And then before we go to the next question, I actually want to say too, so I'm actually the chair of the student commission in the FRSO, and we have a lot of good comrades in, you know, in student organizations such as SDS, Students for a Democratic Society. And I remember in 2014 when 200 people coming out to a Palestine protest was a lot. Like it was a lot in 2014, like, whoa, 200 people. And in the spring, people were shutting down their whole school. Schools were going remote because of the encampments for Gaza movement. We had students who got expelled and deported because of that movement. So, you know, things are certainly not at the level of what the Arab resistance is capable of building in the Middle East. They're having a revolution over there. Obviously, we're not having a revolution here, but things are changing fast, and young people are putting a lot of things on the line, and I think things will just keep changing and sharpening, and there's a lot to be hopeful about, right? Young people who've decided to make this their life and, you know, like won't even get their college degrees that they paid for, things like that. Shout out to SDS in the chat. Yes, Sid.
Yeah, I think those were great answers. I mean, you know, a lot of people come into our areas of work and come into this from different reasons. Many of us, you know, we have working class backgrounds or oppressed nationality backgrounds, and we're so like I said, we come to it from different angles, but most of the time we're pissed off about something. We're pissed off about the experiences that we've seen that our family and that our people come from of you know, this system killing us. Um, and you know out of that anger springs rebellion. But what we want to do as well is move from channel rebellion into liberation, right? And so that's part of what we're doing, organizing in these different areas of work. Um, you know, and we do want to. I think with the Palestine movement and the solidarity movement around the world, we have seen, you know, people like Chrisley mentioned the students. I mean, I see that as just an example of people being pulled into this work and being on a new level, on a different level, where they're willing to sacrifice all of the things that, you know, they were taught they should be holding dear, and willing to give up everything and throw ourselves into the struggles for liberation and into the revolutionary struggle. So I totally do think that in this new area, we're going to see more of that willingness to see what our brothers and sisters there are enduring, and realizing that, you know, we don't want to play by these rules. We want to unite everybody that we can against the monopoly capitalists who are causing all this shit and killing people for money. So I totally agree. It's been rising to a new level, and it's gonna continue to.
Yep, 100%. Thank you, Sid. Yeah, let's get this country back to lighting police precincts on fire. And I know the right wingers won't like that, but let's go next to Amelia Moss.
Hey there. Hey, so I guess my question is, so obviously for the past year and a half, we've seen the links that the ethno state will go to cement its existence and eradicate Palestinians. Obviously I've been completely sickened by it the entire time, and I kind of echo a lot of these sentiments there. I guess my question is ultimately, I've basically gotten to the point where I feel like, because I had joined about a month or so before the actual election, and this is my first meeting here, I feel like there's like a different, I'm sorry, it's tough to articulate. It's just, I somebody in the chat mentioned escalation, and I've seen that around before, and I feel like I'm an individual who is just ready to do whatever needs to be done. What can I do? Because I'm still very much just one person in Jacksonville, Florida at the moment, right? So I want to be doing something concrete and tangible. So what would you recommend for me? Because I know Fern is obviously in Jacksonville, for me or anybody else out here who's just like, I want to get involved. I want to do something immediately. I want to be directly involved in the struggle. What would that take form? Who would I contact, et cetera, et cetera?
Awesome question, and thanks for telling us where you are, Fern.
Yeah, anybody who's on this call from Jacksonville should definitely put a link or something to some social media or an email that this person can contact. But B, to talk about the issue generally, I remember my first day in college when I was like interested in getting organized and I didn't really uh, know people or really know what to do. My important step was trying to look for groups to join in the area that already existed, and they took all kinds of forms. I remember going to meetings of campus Democrats. I remember going to meetings of progressive religious folks and all kinds, and I didn't really find a home per se, but what I did find was in these different social groupings of people, one or two like-minded individuals who felt the way that I felt about the need for change, about the need for radical change. And we didn't have any progressive groups around at the time. And so we said, hey, you and I should start meeting together. We should start talking about what we can do. And maybe we'll put some flyers up around campus and maybe make a social media page and see who joins the social media page. And in that way, two of us became three people meeting, which was a very exciting meeting when we got a third person to come out and be like, hey, I saw your flyer. I like this. I want to get involved in this. And before you knew it, we were able to exponentially uh, grow our forces and start to really take action. And those actions might start out in very kind of simple ways. Maybe we start a petition on a website to try and get something changed that we don't like in our city or in our state. Maybe we get together and craft a couple of letters that we get people to sign and send into local legislators, etc. And from there, you can start getting into the real bread and butter of campus organizing, of community organizing, workplace organizing. Start having broader meetings that you advertise publicly that work on campaigns. And some of what I'm describing is included in our pamphlet called Some Points on the Mass Line. right? In Freedom Road, many of us use the mass line to organize within the ranks of the people's movements. And the mass line pamphlet really lays out some of these principles of getting into the bread and butter of organizing, having meetings, protests, demonstrations, rallies, marching in the streets, leading chants, writing press releases that try to get our message out when we have events to the broader community, to the media, the national media, if we can swing it, and really just starting small, setting material goals and building, step by step, star by star until you get to that point where you've got a real group around you that starts small but is going to grow and really snowball into something that can bring real change about in your community, in your neighborhood, and in the rest of the country too. And the important thing is to always be meeting people where they're at, but pushing the limits too, because we're not going to get to revolution by doing things that we're totally comfortable with doing today. We've always got to be pushing the limits and escalating the struggle to the next step. And again, you start small and you kind of go from there. But the important thing is getting started too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Fern and Amelia. There's a lot of people in Jacksonville waiting to organize with you, but Fern's advice was perfect for people who do not have that in their city. Go out there and get some people together and contact us. All right. So let's go next to John Martin.
Howdy there. Can you hear me fine? All right,
Yes.
lovely. Good night, everyone. Hope you're all doing lovely. So the first, I have two questions to specify. The first would be, how would you fund like all of this, basically? Like, how would you fund the events? How would you fund the protests, resources, supplies, things like that, and all that jazz? That's the first, and after that, I'll ask a second question if that's fine.
Yeah, totally. Panelists, how do we fund these things? Yeah, Sol.
That's a good question, John, because we're not, despite what some of the rumors might be, we're not Soros funded. But it's like my favorite
Figured.
thing to say. But no, you're gonna have to have a party. You're gonna have to have a fundraising party. I'm sorry to tell you, but you're gonna have to make it fun, and you're gonna have to invite people that do have money to spend, right? No, honestly though, it is a thing that you have to think of when you're getting larger too. Like, so Fern gave a good example of, if you make a flyer, you post it online, and then you have 3 people who liked your flyer. Well, if you keep doing that and having good events, people are going to love it, and they're going to keep coming to your events. And depending on how big you end up having your event, you're going to have to think about things like that. And for a lot of us and the Legalization for All network, we had a border delegation in 2023 where I think it was like 20 something people went into the city of Tijuana, Mexico, right? We crossed the border. And then we had a whole other group on this side of the US stay in San Diego and get a tour of Logan Park or Chicano Park to learn about the history of Chicanos and the undocumented on this side of the border, right? And so it was a huge undertaking, and it was super duper expensive. But because we have made a lot of friends along the way, we were able to get a church. We're friends with, I'm just going to shout them out, the Los Angeles Catholic Worker. And if you've heard of any Catholic workers around where you live, please become friends with them. They're super awesome, and they know what they're doing. They're really good at organizing. And so they were able to let us use this 2-bedroom apartment complex, like building, and they gave it to us for free so that we could just house everybody there. And
Well,
even
that's
their
pleasant.
house, they were able to have us stay there as well. And so we just, you form a lot of friendships along the way, and they'll help fund you. But yeah, you definitely need to start by having some awesome actions and gaining people's trust that you will make a good event happen. And throwing a party where you can fundraise is also a really good idea.
Lovely to that. Is there another what's the word? Not delegate, panelist that has anything else to say, by any chance?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I was just
Yeah, we'll
gonna
go
say,
Sid and then Fern. Yeah, go Sid.
I was just gonna say, Sol really gave
Mhm.
some good practical advice, but But absolutely, we have to. Unfortunately, because maybe it's not the thing we love to do the most, but we have to know how to fundraise. That's a part of organizing. Some of these nonprofits have big money. Like Chrissy said, we don't have big money like the Democrats.
Mhm.
And we're not going to get funded like they get funded because the ruling class is not going to fund something that is a part of a revolutionary struggle, right?
Okay.
But we have to get the masses on our side. We have to make friends, and that's how we fund things. And we get the masses on our side by fighting for the things that people care about. And then there are people that have some money, and little by little, that's how we fund things. So we make fundraising part of our organizing as well. Because you're totally right. It does take money to do certain things. That's part of it. But
Okay.
yeah, we're creative.
All right. All right. That's good to know. Um,
I think
so
we've also got Fern who's got an answer to that. Yeah, go ahead, Fern.
Yeah, just very briefly, sometimes if you're just getting started out, you'd be surprised what you can raise from like setting up a little fundraiser online. There's plenty of platforms. Some are better than others, but setting up a little fundraiser online and just saying, hey, we're trying to start this group up. We need to make some flyers. We need to get a table, and we're saving up for a bullhorn. And as someone who's done a lot of what I call shoestring budget organizing with very little money, I've been able to learn that, if you can get $10 out of people, you can go buy poster boards. If you can get to make signs for your protest, if you can get $25 out of people, maybe multiple people to get to $25, you can start to print flyers out. And when you start to get into like 60, $70 that you can raise from people, you can buy your first bullhorn. But a lot of it comes from little donations here and there from different people who want to support what you're doing. And oftentimes I've found folks who are, for whatever reason, unable to physically participate in like a meeting that you've called or a protest. Maybe they're working, they're just not able to make it. They'll throw you a little bit of money towards the cause, and that's an important part of organizing too. You want to be investing it in things like printing out flyers, making sure people have signs to hold at the rally, etc.
All right. Thank you very much, panelists, for answering to the principle of things, but also giving all those detailed, concrete examples. Hope people were taking notes. Okay, so we'll go next to Elizabeth Bjork.
Hi. I just want to thank everyone for having this panel. I want to preface my question with the fact that most of the people that I look up to in organizing are part of Freedom Road, both locally and nationally. My question is from like working with mass orgs that are like specific to different issues like police crimes or anti-war work, or if it will only come about through joining like a party like Freedom Road.
So I think the signal kind of cut out at the first part of your question. Can you ask again what you said before mass orgs? I think that's the part that I didn't catch. Nope. You should be able to unmute now.
Sorry. I just wanted to preface with that most of the people that I look up to are in Freedom Road, both locally and nationally. But do you guys think that legitimate change at like a large scale can happen through just mass orgs, or if it's only possible through joining like Freedom Road, like a party?
There you go. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. We got your question now. What do panelists think? Yeah, Fern.
I think that's a great question. So I think we find this in various like communist writers, but I think in Chairman Mao, he really emphasizes that the masses are the makers of history, right? Again, I think we say that in our mass line pamphlet, which everybody should read if you haven't gotten a chance. But we think that the masses are the makers of history, right? We reject notions that uh, there's like a great man that comes about once in a generation that makes all the history happen, right? We draw inspiration from individuals, sure, but we don't look at Fidel Castro as having been the person that brought about the Cuban Revolution. He certainly played an important role, but it was the Cuban people that brought around the Cuban Revolution. Same thing in Vietnam, in China, and other successful revolutions that we've seen all over the world. So the mass organizations play a very critical role in bringing about social change because the communist element, like ourselves, are always going to be a minority of the people's movement, right? At any given protest, even if you have a very successful district that you're developing in a city for the organization, at any given protest, it's safe to say that uh, if you have a big, large, successful movement, the communists are going to be a minority. We fight for leadership of the mass movements. And we're not going to be the only force fighting for leadership. And we also need to work with different forces to make change happen. But ultimately, our general strategy for revolution is that we're building a united front, all who can be united against monopoly imperialism. And we want united front to be led by the working class and its party, right? And we don't view ourselves as being a party today. We're trying to build that party because we don't think that you can simply declare yourself to be the party of the working class. We think that that's an objective uh, position that a group of communists either hold or don't hold. And we're trying to get to that point, and we can't get there without the mass movements. So I guess to kind of sum up some of the points I was trying to make, it's our job as Reds to join organization. We definitely want to have you on board, but to struggle for leadership within the mass movements because there are some leaders out there that shouldn't be there. And we see that in different trade union leadership that sells out working class interests. We see that when liberal forces are trying to lead different organizations around immigrants' rights or around Black liberation. We want to make sure that Reds that ourselves are fighting for leadership of these movements so that we can help build the mass movements, help build the mass organizations, and ultimately help lead those mass organizations to victory.
All right. Thank you so much, Fern. Yes, Sol.
Just wanted to add just a little bit more, even though Fern, you did a great job. I shouldn't add anymore. So what was I gonna say is that you know, you don't have to necessarily have mass organizations that create this condition, this foundation for revolution, but it's a good idea to do that, right? But sometimes you become friends with people who are not in a mass organization at all. And I'm talking about people who identify with your nationalist movement for liberation, right? For us here in Los Angeles, we consider Los Angeles part of a nation, also known as Aztlan or the Chicano Nation. And one thing that we do here in Los Angeles annually is we hold a commemorative event to remember the 1970 Chicano moratorium. It was one of the biggest protests at that time against the occupation of Vietnam, where over 30,000 Chicanos took to the streets here in East LA. And so, we commemorate that because it was a blow against imperialism and it was amazing. And so when we do that, we build this pretty broad coalition or committee, whatever we call it annually. But, one of my favorite examples of how this is so successful and how you can have people who are not even involved in mass organizations. There was a fundraising event. Here we go again with the fundraising, right? But there's a well-known movie director. And I don't know if I should say his name, but he's the movie director that, did help out with the Selena movie and also another movie that I don't know if Carlos is still on. Yes, he is. Carlos Montes, Walkout, a movie called Walkout. Well, that person held a fundraiser at his house, a very, very beautiful, multi-million dollar house. And he, invited and everyone else invited amazing people who had a lot of money, a lot of Chicanos that were, a little bit more established, had a lot more money than I'll ever have. but they decided to donate tremendous amounts to the commemorative event that year. And there was a private showing of the actual reels that were taken during the Chicano moratorium of 1970. It was a private viewing of that. And so that just like blew my mind, the fact that we were able to connect with someone of such caliber and other people who were willing to donate thousands of dollars all in one sitting to make sure that we had a successful commemorative event. So, you know, while there isn't going to be necessarily one mass organization that is going to start or fund the revolution, we do need to make sure that we're everywhere. You know, like Fern said, we can be at the workplace where it's not really an organization, but it's definitely a group of people who are angry at the boss, angry at the government in general. But yeah, it's going to take fusing those two things together, right? The multinational working class with the movements of national liberation. So yeah, hang in there and keep organizing for that anyway.
All right. Thank you very much to the panelists. We need to party build and build the mass movements. So for time's sake, we're going to just keep the hands to what's up right now, just to let folks know. And let's go ahead and keep going. Let's go next to Anika.
Okay. Hello.
Yes.
Okay. Hi. So I just had a quick question, or I guess maybe it's not gonna be quick. I don't know, it depends. But anyways, I think a lot of the rhetoric that I have been seeing around this election between like Kamala Harris and Donald Trump was you had a lot of like liberals, and I'm gonna say like well-meaning liberals who just automatically thought that Kamala Harris is a better person or a better candidate um, because she's, you know, a black mixed race woman of color. And, you know, like this is not to shame anyone who voted for Kamala Harris, but I think, you know, when you look at her track record, her support of Israel, her time as a prosecutor for California, like she just does not have a very great track record. So I guess my question is like, how do you combat like this bastardization, or I guess almost this like weaponization of like identity politics that sometimes people bring into these conversations as a way to paint, you know, another member of the ruling class as somehow inherently better because of their race, because of their you know, gender identity. Like how do you, you know, like how do you emphasize the class, you know, part of the struggle? Because I think that's where a lot of, you know, people who are on the fence, a lot of liberals who are on the fence kind of like really struggle with.
All right. Thank you, Anika. We've got Sid ready to answer your question. Go ahead.
Okay, I had to unmute. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why, you know, we reject identity politics and we fight for national liberation. And, you know, understand the movements of the oppressed nation, of Black people, of Chicanos and all oppressed nationalities as, you know, central to that struggle for socialism. So we reject identity politics, and there's a reason that that identity politics is so popular, and that's what the ruling class wants to push, because they can just put somebody who holds that identity in there, who will actually represent imperialism, but they think because they hold that identity, you know, people will be none the wiser and fall behind them, and that happens all kinds of ways, you know. Ultimately, like in my experience, the masses are not really on that. The masses are not really on that because it's so clear. We've seen enough people with those identities in positions of power not doing shit that we understand that you know, that it's a smokescreen, or it's a distraction, right? So ultimately, it's like we want to unite the many against the few. in my experience working in the Black liberation movement, I'm sure in other movements as well, ultimately it's like if you're fighting for the same thing that we're fighting for, then let's get together and fight, right? That's what it's about. So I wouldn't pay it too much mind. And like we said before, people learn through struggle. So the more you're actually participating in the struggle to change things and bringing those people who have a lot of wrong ideas get sorted out through practice. So I think that's honestly the main thing. You can talk to people and like you said, well-meaning, but people really learn um, through through their participation in that struggle to change things. So I think that's the main thing. And then a lot of the wrong ideas kind of we can see them for what they are, and they kind of fall away.
All right. Thank you very much, Sid, for laying down the law on that. Anything else panelists want to add? I'm not seeing any, so we'll keep going. Let's go next to Kevin Heaton.
Yeah, do you have any members or any events in Boston ever?
Do we have anyone in Boston?
Or any events?
So I think, is Tom still on this call? We had our organizational secretary who knows a lot about these things, was on the call at work. Let's see. Oh no, he's not on anymore. Okay. Um, someone else who might know a lot about. Yeah, go ahead, Sid.
I was just gonna say the person put your information in the chat or go on the website and send us a message, because we are, since Trump's election, even more people have been writing to us every day, wanting to join the struggle, but it's always a steady stream. So we're constantly starting up areas and starting up work in new areas. So even if there's not a formation there, we're definitely looking to build one. So just connect with us, and wherever you are, we'll work something out and get involved. So definitely sign up.
Yes, absolutely. And the link is in the chat once more. Thank you, Sid. All right. And we'll go again to John Martin. Yes, you had a second question. Go ahead.
Already there. Pardon me for that. The second question was basically, what are you guys going to do for staying power? What happens after Trump, effectively? Like, do you guys plan to build any further networks or any further, I guess, assets for your collective efforts?
What do panelists think? Will we still be here in 4 years? Yes, Soul.
Yes, John, we will. I'm gonna go ahead and answer for the rest of the rest of us, I guess. I don't think Fern's going anywhere, Chrisley or Sid. None of us are going anywhere, John. And I think the objective is revolution, right? So we're gonna be around until revolution. That's my thinking anyway. So hopefully you're still around too, John.
All right, God willing. So one thing, to answer to the first thing, I actually have a little thing I'd like to discuss with members of the Tampa group, as it's a little thing I've been working on for the past couple of months. Actually, no, it's about a year now. It's a possible way for us to make more money. Possibly a way I'll also gain some resources to do fundraising, food initiatives, and gardening, things like that.
Yeah, go ahead, Fern.
Yeah, I guess I kind of wanted to extrapolate a little something from that last question that our friend had. Not only are we going to be here in 4 years, but when I first started organizing, there was a veteran comrade that told me, this race that we're in for power, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? It takes a long time to get the kind of change that we think the people need, that the people deserve in this country. And the fight's definitely not going to be over when Donald Trump leaves office in 4 years. But what I can tell you is Freedom Road is going to be bigger, badder, stronger than ever before. We're going to have more people in more places. And that quantity that we keep talking about, right? Having more comrades, meeting more like-minded people translates into qualitative ability that we have to affect real social change. And a little bit earlier tonight, we talked about winning all that can be won for the people. So I think that comes in the form of uh, having more comrades on the ground, organizing in more places, means that we can affect bigger and bigger things. Maybe this year we're getting, uh, this company to stop investing money in Israeli products. Maybe next year we're, shutting down a port. Like that's what escalation means. That's what, building the movement really means, is the ability to affect larger and larger change, in this country. And I think that, um, since I joined the organization, uh, I don't know if I joined at a good time or whatever, but I've seen nothing but growth, nothing but positive, incremental success. And I think we're going to continue to see that through Trump's presidency and beyond. So I'm excited to see what we're able to accomplish in the next 4 years and beyond for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Fern. And now let's go to our final question of the night. Go ahead, Jesus.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your comments. It's been really insightful. My question pertains to the United Front political line FRSO is adopting. Specifically, I'm interested in how FRSO's adoption of this strategy differs from previous attempts of this popular front line, right? I'm specifically thinking about how the Communist Party, when it was led by Marxist-Leninist principles, and having dedicated Reds like Harry Haywood and Claudia Jones during the late 30s and 40s when they adopted the Popular Front during the 30s and 40s in order to organize around fascism. However, this also led to like movements and trade unions that were communist led being purged of their leaders shortly after the end of World War II, and also led to a full-on communist counter after the movement reached that phase of the struggle. And on top of this, it also led to like more local grassroots level organizing efforts, like the sharecroppers movement in the South being neglected in favor of a more broader popular frontline. So I'm wondering, like, how is FRSO strategy of the United Front different from attempts made in the past? And how does the organization plan on training rank and file members to um, defend against these kinds of inevitable offensives that often happen after like these moments of like popular front building where communists are involved, but they're ultimately like it follows like a really counter offensive to Reds and organizing, while still maintaining a communist-led movement throughout this work. Hopefully that makes sense. I know that was a lot.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question, Jesus. Fern, is your hand up to answer it?
I actually just had left it up from the last question. Uh, to briefly, I guess, answer, I think we certainly draw a lot of inspiration from folks like Harry Haywood and members of the old Communist Party. We think, you know, history grants us the ability to look back and see the mistakes that different groups have made in trying to build for revolution in this country. I think you could analyze many different reasons why the communists, suffered from repression and had difficulties building a united front. I think one thing that we've learned a lot from is mistakes in political line, right? Like there was a point at which the old Communist Party abandoned the national question as we try to uphold it in Freedom Road, recognizing the oppressed nations of the Black Belt South, the Chicano Nation and Aslan, and the Hawaiian Nation. So we try to avoid making some of the mistakes that were made in the past that led to things uh, that led to mistakes that led to difficulties in building the united front. Um, and just to kind of briefly touch on something too, because our friend just mentioned it, we don't view the Donald Trump presidency as presenting a fascist danger. We do not think that he's going to rule in an open terroristic way. We think that the ruling class doesn't really have a need for that right now because the way in which they're ruling today is the way in which they plan on ruling tomorrow. We think that there's going to be a lot of repression. In fact, our group has already proven itself to be experienced at beating back repression, especially the repression of the 2010 FBI raids that were committed against a number of different organizations throughout the country. We managed to beat that repression back, and we're still here, and we're stronger than ever. So those are just some points I wanted to make.
Yes, thank you so much, Fern. And let's go to Sol. I think had her hand up. Go ahead, Sol.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't want to turn this into a bashing of the Communist Party, right? Because as Fern said, they've contributed to a lot of really good revolutionaries whose works I still uphold to this day, right? But yeah, I just find it interesting that in the period of time that we're talking about, where they purged their positions on the national question, right? Which were the 30s and 40s, what was happening during that time were things like the bracero programs in our area of Los Angeles into the States, where the biggest influx of immigrants began because of these bracero programs. You had farm owners who needed to have cheap labor. And so they created these programs to bring in Mexicanos and Centroamericanos into the States, right? And I know for a fact that there's people on this call, like Julie, my friend Julie from Los Angeles, her dad was a bracero. So she's a direct byproduct of those programs and the reinforcing of the Chicano nation. Now I do think that they made some mistakes with maybe wanting to create the United Front at such a pivotal time and then rejecting the national question then. So learning from that, we're definitely not going to do that, right? So if Trump is promising and his czar, right, his border czar is promising that in order to keep families together, they're going to deport families together, we're obviously not going to sit here and say, you know what, we shouldn't think about immigration anymore. We're going to do the opposite of that. This is the time to be bolder than ever, and we're gonna unite everybody who thinks that we should be defending the undocumented families or families who are at risk of being deported or attacked by Trump's hateful rhetoric against the undocumented. So yeah, United Front. We're not going to make mistakes that happened back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to the panelists for explaining our line. We're building a united front. We are not currently building a strategy according to the popular front. We want to build a party. And it was said earlier, our strategy is to build that united front against monopoly capitalism or imperialism, with the strategic alliance between the multinational working class and the oppressed nations at the core of that broad front, right? For and led by the Communist Party and the working class. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your amazing questions. Thank you to the panelists for your presentations and your smooth-ass answers. And I saw lots of people coordinating in the chat to organize with us. I hope everyone fills out FRSO.org/join so we can hear from you all later. And let's get out into the streets. Let's make the United States ungovernable. Let's give Trump the time of his life. He once yelled at Joe Biden, "They're gonna overthrow you." Let's turn that around and let's turn it around on Trump and give him nightmares every night. Thanks everyone for being on this call, and we hope to see you again. Take care.